don't think I want that one. Oh, what's up? What's up? What's up? Let's see if we can get things going here. All right. Now, this is not the typical tech talk for Tech Talk Thursday because I didn't schedule this one. But I have decided that I have a moment in my schedule, and so now is the time to talk tech and to answer any questions related to tech, being in tech, getting into tech, all kinds of things tech related. That said, if you have comments, questions related to tech, feel free to drop those down below so we can get this thing started for this evening. We're going to run this thing about an hour, maybe a little bit more, but enough to get the tech related questions answered and hopefully have some topics for next time to pass on for next time. Okay. Yeah, so how y'all doing this evening? 6,003 files. Screenshot. Come on, computer. What's up? What's up? Talking tech this evening, so if you have any tech questions, feel free to drop those down below so we can get this thing on started. That works. Save. All right. Hello, Sam. Or not Sam. So we're doing tech talk this evening. I know this was not scheduled, but I have some moments free in my schedule. So I figured why not go ahead and do tech talk since it is Thursday on a day I typically do the tech talk discussions. All right, and I've got that fixed. So yeah. What SaaS tool do you use in your development pipeline, and is it automated or a manual SAST? Okay, that's obviously SAST. I've never heard of it referred to as a SAST. So obviously I'm looking it up. SAST, Static Application Security Testing. Okay. Scans the source of files of application to identify security flaws in the code. To be honest, I don't have one of those. And this is, to be honest, is the first time I've ever heard of SAST as the acronym you presented. That being said, though, analyze application source code, bytecode for coding known vulnerabilities. So I will say this. I do have many projects in or on GitHub. With those projects, GitHub actually has a built-in vulnerability checker thing. And if you turn it on, well, it may be on by default. But if it's not on by default, you can go into the settings of that particular project repository and turn it on. And it will scan your project to determine what it is. And then from that, it will let you know if there are vulnerabilities. There's also, if there are like updates, if you will, those updates to that particular project. For example, Bootstrap. So Bootstrap gets updates periodically, and Bootstrap is actually hosted the repository is on GitHub. So when there's an update to Bootstrap, if you have a Bootstrap, like heavy Bootstrap project, you will get a notification if you have that vulnerability thing turned on that says, hey, this project has a dependency, it's been updated. You may want to go ahead and get the latest version. So that's a built-in feature of GitHub. Now, are there any other tools? Yes. Am I familiar with them? I'm not, unfortunately. Typically, the applications that I've built thus far, they don't require those type of vulnerability checks. And I say they don't require those vulnerability checks because the majority of applications that I have running as of right now, not necessarily those that I've built over time, are static websites. So even if there was a vulnerability in the tool that's used to build the website out, the static website itself would not have an issue because of the fact it's a static website, meaning no database. Alan Takis, do you think it's worth to get a degree in computer science to be hired by companies? Not required. Beneficial, yes. Required, no. But what I do tell people is you do need to have a degree. Otherwise, you will hit a glass ceiling sooner than those that do not have a degree. And I know that firsthand from other people. Like I had a director that was over me. He didn't have a degree, and he got passed over for a promotion to be the site director. So that being said, yeah, you need to have a degree, whether it's actually computer science or software engineering or just a degree in general, will allow you to not hit that glass ceiling, or you're less likely to hit that glass ceiling than if you did. Opinion on graph databases. I am not familiar with those. I don't do any work with those. Majority of the stuff I do is with MySQL or SQL Server. In the past, I've worked with Oracle, and yeah, so I can't really speak to graph databases. I can speak to relational databases, though. Keep the questions coming. So, yeah, like I say, I'm going to try to run this thing till about the top of the hour, maybe a little bit thereafter. So you all have time to get your question in, but don't wait till the last minute to get your question in because you may not get your question answered. SQL Server in Azure. So the SQL Server that I deal with is actually locally hosted. We do have some SQL Server instances that are in Azure for our dev and test environments, but our production environment is on site. And so, not that it makes a difference, because regardless of where you run SQL Server, it's still SQL Server. But I will say that even if you have Azure, you're not bound to SQL Server, even though it is a Microsoft product. You can use other technologies like MySQL or Postgres or NoSQL or any of those other database things that go from there. Are you a freelance developer employed by a company or both? Do you have to sign a non-compete? So a mix of both, to be honest with you. For the current role that I'm in, no, I did not have to sign a non-compete. So yeah, in previous roles that I've held, yes, I had to sign a non-compete. But it's different when you're not in the private sector. So yeah, there's that. Bachelor's degree stuck in help desk. Any advice? Matthew, you will need to, one, figure out what you want to do as far as help desk goes. Most people, and I emphasize most people, use help desk as a stepping stone to get to something next. The stepping stone is very dependent upon what you want to do. With help desk, yes, you have that experience, but that experience doesn't guarantee that you will be successful in whatever you move into next. As far as getting out of help desk, if your bachelor's degree is in computer science, then you shouldn't have any problem pivoting to something else. If it's outside of computer science, you may have some issues. And the biggest thing I would say to you is find a path, whether that be software development, cybersecurity, whatever the case may be, and work your way down that path. Don't deviate. Don't try to do all the things. Pick a path and stay on that. What's a good salary out of college for software engineering? That will vary depending upon where you live. And I'm not going to quote an exact number because of the cost of living in New York versus the cost of living in Alabama are two different things. So I don't know where you're located, but the point being is I typically tell people you need to assess what is the cost of living in that particular location where that job is located. And then from that, you use that to make a determination of what your salary should be. How is it? Not how is it? I'm sorry. Matthew would like to move into the direction of penetration testing, bachelor's in cybersecurity. Okay, so then you should be able to just go straight into that. To be honest with you, if you have a bachelor's in cybersecurity, you need to just start doing penetration testing, like set up a home lab. Because a lot of the stuff y'all, if you were on the previous month's live, will sound very repetitive. But I'm gonna say this: you need to have a home lab. Once you have the home lab, you can then do whatever you need to do from that. So if you need to practice penetration testing, you set up your home lab, you practice your penetration testing, and you try to break into the devices on your own network. Then when you go to the interview, you can be like, yeah, I have a home lab and this is what I've done to practice penetration testing. These are the tools, and I have this device over here and I was able to use this tool to get into this device, or I was able to go into this device and lock down the firewall, and then when I attacked it with whatever tool, because I don't know the penetration testing tools, so that's why I say this and that. When you use your home lab to practice penetration testing and anything else related to cybersecurity, and then you can go into the interview and say, I've done this. And if you really want to be extensive about it, you blog or vlog. Blog as in writing or typing, vlog as in creating video content related to that, and then you use that as a marketing tool for yourself on the various social media platforms, including LinkedIn, because I want to emphasize LinkedIn is the biggest thing with LinkedIn is if you know how to market yourself, you will get job opportunities from LinkedIn, not having to go chase them on LinkedIn. Silas, excuse me if I'm butchering your name. How easy is the transition from developer engineer to software architect? Is it more lucrative? It should not be that much of a difference. You may have to get a certification or two to do that, but a lot of times the software architect roles are similar in nature, and also the software architect typically has a lot more of experience. And experience, I mean years of experience. Eric Vasquez, Java. I used to do Java. I currently do not. Not saying I can't go back to it. I currently primarily do C# and PHP and build web-based applications. So that also includes doing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, and a little bit more. How many jobs do you prefer to work at once? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I mean, I have my full-time job, and then I have a business that I run that my freelance stuff is under that business. Commendez, good advice. All right, thanks. You're welcome. Matthew Rose, suggestion for virtual machines, seeing a lot of focus with cloud networking. Thank you all for your help. Virtual machines, there are many out there. There's Oracle VirtualBox. There's VMware, they all have stuff. Conceptually, they're all the same. So I would, if you're trying to specialize in doing that, I would say first pick a cloud platform, then become familiar with that particular cloud platform and how they do virtual machines, and then from that you practice and become familiar with that particular cloud provider's virtual machine setup. Now you can do virtual machines on your own equipment. However, if you're trying to do more cloud-based stuff, it's best to just use what they have and become familiar with that. Tim, what certifications do you think would be good to get to move up to the SWE hierarchy? And for those of you that do not know, SWE, SWE, is software engineer. For that, excuse me while I plug my phone in. For that, I would recommend that you, whatever programming language that you're proficient in, you find a set of certifications that are relevant to that, and then you use that to work your way up the hierarchy. Now, also, I would say, again, going back to the home lab concept, you can build a home lab that where you have a website, and that website, if you want to, like for me, I do web development primarily. I can build desktop applications, but that's not my thing. I primarily build web-based applications and use those, even if it is something that's designed to only run on maybe one or two other machines. From that perspective, build a home lab and then practice doing what you want to become great at. And when you do that, you'll then get the experience, and then you can use that experience to leverage promotions. And thanks to those of you that have already liked the live. All right, so where are we? Anthony Corella. How much do you think data structures and algorithms play a part in landing a job? It does not depend as much as a software engineer as it may as a data analyst, or even a someone who does like a lot of business reports, those type of things. So data structures in those regards, or even a database administrators, definitely data structures play a lot in that part. So you'll want to, depending on your role, determines on whether or how much it actually plays a part in. Abuthar, how's C# on the back end? Currently doing JavaScript stack, but have C# experience, so wondering. C# is great. I would say you need to look into the .NET 7 or .NET 8 is, I think .NET 8 is on its way out this year. So .NET 7 is the latest version, but .NET 6 is the latest long-term support version. The new .NET setup is based is cross-platform, so you can, like, I have a Linux computer here at home. The same stuff I do at home, I can go to work and do at work on my Windows computer, because it's cross-platform. So you can build an application in Windows, and there's actually a way you can do a deployment to for a Raspberry Pi using the same code set, and then you could deploy that same application to a Windows, Linux, or whatever other platform. So it is very great in that regard. Data Daddy. I mean, like being overemployed. Okay, so you asked a question about two jobs, and I may not be able to find it. Overemployed, I have no personal problem with being overemployed, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people currently are overemployed. It's just a lot of them won't admit it. And when I mean overemployed, I mean you're working more than one job. Now, I know some people are doing 2 full-time jobs. Me personally, I ain't got the free time for that. But I think a lot of people are overemployed at this point, to where, I mean, that's just making sure that you keep a roof over your head and food in your mouth. You gotta, this day and age, it seems like you gotta kind of work 2 jobs to even just get the basics. Commendez, do you know the name of the AWS RDS equivalent on Azure? No, I don't. I'm not. One of the things I do want to do this year is to get a Azure certification, if not 2. However, I have not looked into any of that other than being told this is what I should do to start out. So, unfortunately, I can't answer that one. Don, hello. I'm a beginner coder. What languages should I learn if I want to work remotely? Working remotely has nothing to do with the programming languages that you know. That being said, if your goal is to work remotely and you don't know how to program, but you want to be a remote programmer, you need to learn how to program first before you even begin talking about working remotely. And like I say, those 2 things are not even related. But if you can't even do programming, nobody's going to give you a remote job. They'll probably give you an on-prem job because they can see you and they can assist you. But a remote job in that regard, probably not. Typically, what I tell people is, as far as the beginning programming languages, that the 3 that I recommend in no particular order are Java, C++, and C#. Most people will say, why not Python? Because Python is not structured the same way as those other 3 languages are. So once you learn one of those 3, you're practically, in my opinion, set for any other programming language that exists out there. Johnny says, my bread and butter has been monitoring team, Datadog, Spectrum, SolarWinds, and soon to be Azure monitoring. I assume that's what that means. Okay. Yeah, and nothing wrong with being in monitoring. To be honest with you, though, if you're having to do a monitoring job, you may want to really consider finding something else, because in my opinion, a lot of the monitoring can be automated. Like I've worked at places where the monitoring was fully automated, and only once the system detected there was a problem would it then throw a ticket for somebody to actually go and investigate. So I'm not sure of the longevity of a monitoring type of job, but that, that can be varied. Rixo, how can I get an internship in New York as a data scientist? I can't speak specifically to locations. That being said, though, you want to first find opportunities wherever they are with the companies that have those things. Pretty much every company, what I tell people is every company has IT, whether it's just sending emails and a website or a social media presence, every company has IT. Now, typically you're going to see data scientists in larger companies and maybe even at universities where they do research type of things. So you may want to consider looking at those for that type of opportunity. Have I tried out TypeScript? Yes, I do know TypeScript and I'm very familiar with it. User with a bunch of numbers. What's your thoughts on boot camps? Do you see many boot campers actually in the field? My thoughts on to answer the second question. I hear of people in boot camp that have done boot camps, and I do see or hear of them in the field. My thoughts on boot camps. I personally say if you do a boot camp that is less than 1 year, you're not going to succeed greatly. And I say that because of the fact myself and other people that I know, they have 2, 4 years, 6 years, even with master degrees in IT, computer science, software engineering, whatever the degree was in, and they're great at their careers. There's no way you or whoever, as a someone who's brand new to tech, whether you because in some cases people are switching career fields to get into tech. And then they say, I'm gonna take this boot camp and I'm gonna be good as this guy over here who has done this who has got a 4 year degree on top of 5 years experience. Ain't no way, boy. Ain't no way. And so that's why I typically tell people if you do a boot camp that's less than a year, you're not going to be great as the person who has got a 4 year degree or even a 2 year degree, because in that 2 year degree is structured and you have to practice those things. In a boot camp, yeah, you're going to class probably every day, but a 3 month boot camp can't give you 2 years or even 4 years worth of knowledge in a way that you would be able to absorb it in that time frame. Data analyst or web development? Personally, I would say web development, but that's just me because I do web development. To be honest, data analysts typically, like I've had to do analysis type work in the past. I hated it. And what I would do is actually build out automations that would do that type of work for me to present it in the manner that I needed it so I didn't have to manually go in there and try to crunch numbers. Don, thank you so much. I've asked many people and I've never received a direct answer. Yeah, and my thing is I have no shame in trying to hold out. I know I'm not trying to hold out people. I won't, do I think somebody would try to take my job? Probably. Am I scared of that? No. Why? Because I'm confident in my abilities to be able to do things. In addition to present this information to you, obviously means I'm not trying to hold it. And a lot of people, as they say, gatekeep, and gatekeeping will keep your job. I disagree. Gatekeeping, not only does it help other people, but then gatekeeping elevates you because other people see what you know. And then once they recognize that you know that, now you become a resource for them to answer additional questions. Johnny, we have been automating a lot of our monitoring, might switch to Azure Cloud Architect soon. Yeah, and that's what I say. A lot of monitoring, gone are the days where somebody needs to sit there and watch the computer do what it do, because we have technology now that's capable of basically creating tickets to track whatever is going wrong or throwing alerts, whether it's email or ticketing system or something else of that nature, to have somebody to come and look at it when it actually happens. So I fully agree for that. I think boot camps are declining. I did a 6 month boot camp and have been a professional developer for 1 year. Driver, I do agree. Boot camps do not give you the level of success as one may think it has or how they have been sold to give you. Now, I'm not saying your boot camp is horrible, but I am saying in general, boot camps have gotten this I guess, a false sense of success where, oh, you come with us for 3 to 6 months and you'll be the greatest thing once you graduate. Not the case. Some people actually do a boot camp and they still can't get a job after they graduate. And you have to ask the question, well, why not? And turns out they haven't mastered the stuff as great as they should have while they were in the boot camp. So now that they're out of the boot camp, they're struggling, and in some cases, they can't comprehend the stuff, and they don't have the connections to ask other people, "Hey, can you help me with this programming concept?" So there's that. Jack Knight. What about mobile development? Native or cross-platform? Ideally, you would build something that is cross-platform, so you only have to write the code one time. However, I know there are certain features that are specific to iPhone and specific to Android that you can only get by doing native code. So, in my opinion, I would say cross-platform, but there you go. Driver, I think this is pure cap, bro. My computer science coworkers foundation in computer science has not helped. And that may be, here's the thing, right? Some people are great at programming, some people are not. And I'm not saying, like I say, all boot camps are not bad. However, some boot camps do not properly prepare people because each boot camp is going to be different. In my opinion, you as someone who does, and not you specifically, driver, but a person who only does a boot camp for 3 to 6 months, because some of these boot camps are like 3 months long, you cannot, it is difficult for someone to be able to acquire the knowledge that someone who has been doing this for 2 or 4 years and then be at the same level and then be like, well, why I ain't get the job? That's just my thoughts. What do you know about becoming a career? What do you know about becoming an IT technician as a career? And that's from TikTok user ACC. TikTok, too many T's on the screen right now. Technicians, they do well. Oftentimes people will do the technician, but they'll advance into something else. So you may be a technician to start out, but then you may advance to network administrator or system administrator or something else. So that being said, just know that a lot of, at least the people that I've seen, they may start out as technicians, but they don't stay there for their entire career. User with a bunch of numbers. Do you meet very many people without degrees that actually have landed a software job? I'm gonna say no. Well, I'm gonna say no. Because majority of people, they have a degree, even if it's not in computer science or software engineering. But that's not to say you can't get a software engineering job. That is to say that if you don't have a degree, your barrier to entry is taller than someone who does have a degree. So just keep that in mind. Hoof. I'm sorry. Will web development be automated? To an extent, but it can't be to an extent. And I say that as someone who does web development. There are some aspects that I can go and put into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gives me an output. However, there are some things that ChatGPT won't get right. So that being said, some of it can be, but will it be entirely? Not necessarily. User with a bunch of numbers. Would like to switch careers, but very doubtful I can swing going and getting a bachelor's degree. I would first say start off with certifications if you can that are related to what you're trying to do. Just going to get a bachelor's degree would be a stretch, and also expensive. And not saying you should never go and get a degree because it's expensive, but I am saying though that you should really want to consider the pros and cons of getting a degree. Like, do you have the time? Do you have the financial resources? Because student debt is a big deal right now, at least in the Americas. I'm not sure where everybody else is watching from right now, but that's a big deal. And so when it gets to the point of you trying to go and get a degree, well, then once you graduate, they're gonna want their money back, and you may not necessarily, depending on what school you choose to attend, may not be able to keep up with the debt that you incurred. So that's something to consider. Is front end development dead? No, because front end development has a lot to do with both being able to display and mobile friendly websites. We also want to talk about accessibility, web accessibility. So like your website, if your website is not within the bounds of ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, then you could be sued or your company could be sued. So front end development is very much alive. A repeat question from Sid. I am a software engineer 2. I want to pivot to data science. Thoughts, pros, and cons. Personally, looking at numbers is not a bad thing in my opinion, but to be honest with you, data science, don't get me wrong, it's a useful field, and but a lot of those things, once you build out like reports or whatever in as a data scientist, you shouldn't really have to go back to doing those things, the same data sets over and over again. I would also say, like, if you're using as a web developer, you may as a web developer and wanting to get into data scientist or science, you may want to consider like looking into reporting, because a lot of data science is looking at the analytics of things and projections and all that other type of stuff. So that building reports may be useful as well. Excuse me, Arjun Gill, is becoming a blockchain software developer a good field to go down? I'm about to finish my computer science degree. Yes. I can't really speak to blockchain because I don't know much about it. I've heard of it, but there's that. But it is a lot of opportunities that will be more likely, especially more so when quantum computing becomes a thing, that will probably be available after that point. Oasis, any advice on networking to get an interview? Start with LinkedIn, attend conferences, and find local events for people that are in tech. So, like, for instance, where I am, there's a nonprofit group it's funded through the city and various other government entities to interact and get people together that are in the tech and STEM spaces. So that type of event, you may want to try to attend those type of events. Like I say, conferences, tech related conferences. So there's Afrotech and I can't think of any others right now. I'm drawing a blank. But that's how you would do it. And then also on that, LinkedIn, the biggest thing you can do, LinkedIn is free. So, and even if you choose to sign up for premium, it's going to be cheaper than going to a conference. LinkedIn, what you should do, you start posting about the stuff that you are working on as it relates to whatever it is. So if you're a C# programmer, start talking about C# and consistently talk about C#. You may need to post once a week or even twice a week on LinkedIn to talk about it. Eventually, you'll start drawing in attention from people who are looking for C# developers, and very easily you'll probably get an interview from that. But you'll have to be consistent with that. PHP is outdated. I disagree. PHP is running WordPress among a bunch of other websites, so if it really was outdated, WordPress would not be a thing now, so I don't agree. I got laid off with a 7 YOE. I have no idea what that means. No PHP and SQL. I see tons of .NET jobs. Should I apply anyway? Oh, 7 years of experience. Okay, got it. Yeah, you can apply. Just understand that Node and PHP are a little bit different than .NET. You shouldn't have too much of a difficulties because PHP is, assuming you did PHP as object-oriented PHP and not procedural PHP, you should be fine with that. And then Node, your JavaScript familiarity, you can do, typically .NET is paired with TypeScript, but you can also do JavaScript with that. So I don't foresee major issues with that. The biggest thing I would see, in my opinion, is having to switch from the technologies, but the syntax and languages should be familiar to you once you get used to it. What do you know about cybersecurity, and where do I, as a senior in high school, get started? The biggest thing, as I mentioned earlier, set up a home lab. You'll want to do the home lab and then start doing like penetration testing, understanding firewalls, and the various concepts. As for certifications, would be your next step as well. There are the Security Plus certifications, there's also Network Plus, and then there's a bunch of cybersecurity certifications from the various authorities. So that's where you want to start out with, is home lab and certifications. I'm not sure what your degree is or will be, but you'll want to consider that as well. Police Clips, do you recommend learning PHP? Yes, it is relevant if you're going to build web-based applications. If you're not going to be building web-based applications, don't waste your time on that. TikTok user AAC, great advice. Thanks. You're welcome. Love the braces. Seeing you seeing you better yourself. Peace. All right. Thank you for joining and watching. And yes, hopefully these braces will come off pretty soon because it does make things difficult to eat. Jay, if you don't have a degree, look for small companies. I can't attest to that, but that does seem like reasonable because typically the smaller the company, especially like startups, they're looking for whoever has skills and not so much focused on whether you actually went to school and a number of other things. Karma's BF is C++ worth learning? To an extent, it depends on what you're doing. So if you're building like embedded systems, and I'm trying to find this ESP32 that I got here. So if you're building embedded systems like this right here, those things still run on C++. Now I know the White House and whoever else said don't learn C++ because they're not memory secure and so forth. Forget all of that. This thing right here, even though it does have a Wi-Fi chip and Bluetooth chip on it, majority of the times people are not building these things to connect to the internet. And so you're not going to exploit a vulnerability on this thing here if it's not connected to the internet. So keep that in mind. And yes, it is still worth learning. Master B, if you're looking to get a job, master a object-oriented language, JavaScript, SQL. I do agree with that. I don't know what you mean by WCAG, Anthony. Davajar, is it possible to self-learn AI? Yeah, you can. It may take some time to do it, but yes. TikTok user AAC, do you know of any government aid or free grants to help pay for the cost of tech school? Fill out the FAFSA is the first thing that I will tell you. From that, they will give you, assuming you qualify for any federal aid towards school. Beyond that, I do not know. You may want to consider looking at some of these nonprofit organizations. The National Society of Black Engineers does give out scholarships. You can look up those. I'm sure there's probably some other stuff like PMI, Project Management Institute, that may give out some as well. But look at the organizations and definitely fill out the FAFSA if you're going to be enrolling in the school. All right, Sid, I guess I'm thinking more of machine learning when I say data science. Thanks for the answer. All right, you're welcome. Blaine Parker, I've been struggling to learn CI/CD with GitHub workflows. Have you played around with it? Yes, I have automated deployments for all of the static websites that I maintain using CI/CD. GitHub Actions, you also want to check out GitHub Marketplace. The GitHub Marketplace will actually have the pre-built actions that you can use to do some of these CI/CD things that you're trying to do. The alternative to that is to go on YouTube or any other platform or blogs and see, how other people done, or even just look at other repositories to see, because there is a way you can search repositories for the actions there and basically just copy those. Thanks, Tobias, for the heart. Genomo Math, I've done .NET before, but not professionally. Just curious if you had any tips to get my resume seen. Biggest thing I'll say is I don't know what your resume looks like. That being said, though, you may need to get a professional resume writer to review your resume and provide adjustments, or even just redo the resume entirely. The biggest thing you want to highlight in your particular case, since you're switching languages or technology stacks, is to highlight your programming experience in general and the outcomes from that experience. One of the biggest things you want to do is also quantify the various things, so improved efficiency by 20%, those type of things in your resume. Zach, we have a partnership web development for 10 weeks. Do you suggest that? I would be hesitant because, in my opinion, like I kind of mentioned earlier about boot camps, it's kind of difficult to learn those type of stuff within that short amount of time frame. Because you have to remember, I've been doing web development. Granted, I've been doing it in different programming languages, but I've been programming in general, or have been in IT for over 15 years. That being said, trying to learn something in 10 weeks and then saying you'll be great when you get out of here, that is struggle at best. What year is this? 2010? No, it's not, but there you go. Andreas, what should I do if I want to get into the tech industry, specifically cybersecurity? So that question has been answered, but I'll answer it again, and that is to get certifications related to cybersecurity, also set up a home lab and practice doing penetration testing and setting up firewalls and just learning how to do networking in general and how to stop threats. Because a lot of cybersecurity is just knowing how to administer the network and to be able to stop those type of threats from coming in. Ninja Tech 54, funny because we like the same stack. Hey, there's that. Pablo Pell Grant. Yes, Pell Grant. I couldn't think of the name, but I know if you fill out the FAFSA, you get the Pell Grant, and there are loans that will be given, or you'll be offered loans. You don't have to accept the loans, but I would always say accept the grants because grants are money that you don't have to pay back. Great C++ take. Thank you. Naja Tech, CI/CD is more complex on AWS, but it's more difficult with code builds. I'm not familiar with that, so I can't really speak to that. Karma's BF, what programming languages are most prominent in cybersecurity? Based on what I know a lot of people do like Python scripts and shell scripts. As far as what else is outside of that, I'm not 100% sure. But those people that I do know, when I've talked to them, they say they have these scripts in either Bash or Python that run whatever things that they're trying to do. Thoughts on Ubuntu? I use it. I got both of my computers on this desk right here. You can't see them, but they both run that, and I do the LTS releases. I don't do the incremental releases personally because I hate having to do updates. And if I do an update, I typically start it and let it do what it does until it gets done. Jay Jordan, why should I choose C# over Java as a backend language coming from working with JavaScript? Pretty much you can't go wrong with either one. A lot of their frameworks or the way they're set up are similar in nature. That being said, depending on what you're using with that, there may be some benefits to using one versus the other, but in general, if you have C# or Java, you're fine either way. Ninja Tech, it takes 4 to 5 years. For what exactly? I'm sorry. H2, trying to get into IT so I can transition to computer science engineering. Any advice? If you're trying to get a degree, you may want to become familiar with things beforehand. If you're trying to just do the non-degree route, then certifications would be your best opportunity. You also want to practice before you get into that field too deeply, because of the fact computer science is not something that comes inherent or comes easy to a lot of people. Thanks for the help. You are welcome. You Good says, do you think AI will take job market share within the next 5 years? Not significantly. A lot of people ask that question like AI is going to take our jobs. AI is not going to take your job. And I say that because of the fact somebody has to program the AI. A lot of people are scared or have been scared, and I'm like, no, somebody still has to program the AI. Somebody has to maintain the server that the AI is running on, because it won't be able to update itself. And even if it does update itself, in the event there's a power outage while it's deploying itself, a human has to step in and say, all right, roll back to this or whatever else. So it's not going to take all the jobs like some people are thinking, or like some people have been talking, because of the fact there's still going to be things that only a human would be capable of doing. Says, how did you approach learning Linux? On the job training, to be honest with you, and a bunch of Googling. My first experience with Linux was working when I was in college. My boss had he was given something to maintain. It was a website. It was a custom built content management system, and that ran on, I don't even remember what version of Linux, but it ran on some version of Linux. So it had MySQL. It was a LAMP stack: Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So that was my first exposure with it. So doing a bunch of Googling and so forth, I got familiar with it in that regard. After that, I got a full-time job working, doing application support. And so we had a bunch of Unix and Solaris. I'm sorry, not Unix, Solaris and Linux servers that ran pretty much everything. So at that point, I had to learn a lot there. So that was on the job experience. In addition to one of the other guys that was on our team, he was very proficient at Linux. And so he showed me a lot of stuff that, like, he knew all the commands. He was like, yeah, you can run this command to do this. And it's like, wow, why didn't I learn that earlier? And so that was one way. And then I did have a class that was in college that we had to learn Java. And back then we were using Subversion. This was before Git became the popular source control. So we had to use Subversion, and we had Linux on a stick. I forgot which version of Linux it was, but we had Linux on a stick. So all of our code for that class was on a stick, and then we would commit to the class repository the source code for our homework assignments and such. So that's how I learned it. Goal for Tuan, is reinforcement learning useful yet? I don't know what you mean by that. Could you explain? Mac Maddox, what's happening? We are talking tech. You good? I'm getting through the Gray Hat hacking book, but it's taking me so long because every library I try to download doesn't work, or I have to mess with it. So you'll want to, in my opinion, if you're having issues with the libraries, you may want to consider going on Google and seeing if there's like an updated URL to that library. Because the thing with libraries, like some people, they stop getting support. Like the maintainer or the creator of that library may quit maintaining it because of whatever may happen. Sometimes that library gets forked and somebody creates their own version of the same thing. A bunch of stuff can happen. So see if the URL may have changed to that library or something else, or maybe there's an alternative available that you can get. 100% on the Tobias says 100% on the AI Take Two. Just scrolled into your content. Thank you, good sir. I'm assuming this is sir. If not, I'm sorry. Love it. Keep the great advice. Yes. Subversion, bringing back memories. Yes, Subversion was not. Subversion did not play nice, and you had to get it right because you could very easily destroy a repository in Subversion. That's one thing that I hated about it, but that was the thing at the time. Git didn't come along until, I think GitHub was actually a thing at that point, but it wasn't as popular at the time because this is circa 2010, 2011. So we were still using Subversion where I worked at the IT office on campus. And it wasn't until maybe 2013 or so that Git started to become more mainstream, at least in the circles that I was in. JDEC Gaming, what coding should I look into for web design and game development? Game development would be C++. You can also look into Unity. That is a framework. I think Unity runs on C++ and or C#. I could be wrong on that. But C++ is what I hear a lot of people or developers are using for that. As far as web design, that is wide open. There's C# for web design, backend specifically, or server side, PHP for web design, Java for web design. So all of those things are viable options. What is my focus in tech? As mathematics, I primarily do, as you see up here, C#, PHP, HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and Linux. That is my. Now I've done more than that, but as of now, because I did an interview, and y'all excuse me, my dog is over here trying to figure out what he's trying to do. But my tech stack, that's it right there. I did an interview one day, and the guy was like, hey, you have a lot of great skills, but your skills are very broad. You need to narrow them down. So this is what I have narrowed them down to. Granted, there's a little bit more. You could throw Windows in there too a little bit, but that's my preferred tech stack. Thank you for the likes and the follows. Maria, most useful programming language for cybersecurity? Python. Some say Python. You can also learn bash scripting because from what I understand, a lot of the cybersecurity threat detection and monitoring type of things usually runs on shell scripts and in the console, not in a browser or graphical interface. And so both of those, yeah, there you go. No, sir. Not sir. Okay, sorry. DT, I'm trying to get database management. What coding language would I need to learn for that? Database management will be, there is no coding language. Your biggest thing is you're going to have to learn SQL in a general context. Database management is database system specific, because what you can do in Oracle is not the same thing as what you can do in SQL Server, is not the same thing that you can do in MySQL. So that being said, there is no one programming language for that, because of the fact the database language itself like each database system has its own language. So you need to figure out which database system you want to be great at, or if you want to be great at multiple, then you learn those specifics to that particular language stack. You good. I'm not good at software development, but I'm really good at competitive programming. How do I get, I'm assuming you say better at job skills. I don't know what software development or it is actually. I'm going a non-college route. Okay. So better at competitive programming. So if you're good at competitive programming, then you should be good at software development. And if you're not, then that's I don't know what to say about that one. Because if you can program in general, then you should be good at software development. What I will say though is if you're not confident in your software development skills, then you probably just need to practice on doing things outside of the scope of competitive programming. So if your competitive programming is building games that run in the console, then branch out and do something like building web applications or building an API or something else of that nature. Because software development is not like you got to do it a certain way, right? Depending, like there's various frameworks, there's various architectures, there's various design patterns. There are a lot of other things out there related to software development. And so what you may have to do is you may say, all right, I do this competitively, but then what can I do that's not competitive? And then build that. And that will expand your software development skill set, in my opinion. Now, as far as job skills, you may need a career coach or you may need a mentor to be able to assist you in bettering those job skills. I'm not sure what specific skills that you're lacking at right now. Thank you, Tobias, for the lightning. But you gotta identify where your sufficient deficiencies are at, and then from that, go from there. Corey, Avalon, Xamarin, Maui, WinForms, WinUI, WPF, preference. I'm gonna say none of those because I build web-based applications, so I don't do anything related to any of those technologies. WPF, if you're still building WPF applications, you might want to get up with the times because that's very archaic, in my opinion. Mathematics. C# is heavily used on the corporate side. Have you looked into Rust programming language? No, because this is the tech stack that I have right now, and I plan on sticking with it unless something bigger, better, or newer comes along, or if I were to change jobs and requires me to learn something different than one of those. Dishwasher Man just built a sweet Python script that connects to Excel and uploads data to a website. Pumped to learn. Yeah, and I mean, you can learn that type of stuff in Python, but you can also do it in C#. Not to discredit the Python language, but my thing is, like, I've done Python for maybe a short amount of, and that was to do, the Python was to do the controller for that traffic light. The issue with the controller with the traffic light is maintaining it in Python, and again, that got me out of this tech stack. So I was like, you know what, no more Python, rewrite it to a different language. And so that traffic light then became a C# control traffic light, which then became a C++ traffic light. So yeah, the controller inside of that is, I kind of need two hands. But this right here, the ESP32, is one of those inside of there, in addition to a couple of other components. And that runs C++. What do I do now? Ask Ivan. I am a programmer that builds web-based applications, but I have a bunch of other projects, like using things like this. And I have a Christmas light show that I run during the Christmas holiday season. Corey, it's muscle memory. Competitive programming is practicing data structures and algorithms. Got it. So yeah, software development, if you really want to do software development, you can take that competitive programming and just slow it down. Take your time. Because, I mean, the same algorithms and data structures that you're building in those type of applications for your competitive programming, you're probably going to be doing the same thing when you're building actual software. You good. I mean, I have high code force rating, 1800s, not red, but better than 90% of the users. However, whenever I build apps is very hacky. I just do random stuff till it comes together. Okay, so in my opinion, you really probably just need to practice, right? And not practice in a competitive manner. Just practice building just regular software applications. Because if you're building stuff in a hacky manner, that means you know how to be able to think to build whatever it is that you're trying to build, but traditional software development is not built in, a short time crunch or anything else of that nature. And so, in my opinion, like when you're doing software development, you have to take a moment and kind of think about, okay, how am I going to structure this project? And then you structure it out. And then you go from there and then you fill in the various things. So I think you have the skill set to do full blown software development. You just need to practice it in a non competitive environment to then be able to apply it to a normal software development environment, if that makes sense. Dishwasher, nope, I already sorry, I already read that one. Where are we? Recognize which to use based on the prompt. Okay. Yeah, got it. All right. Thank you, Tobias, for the lightning bolts. You good. I build apps, very hacky. Okay, we covered that one. Whoops. Corey, do the same thing. Do the same training, but projects. Do a clone of the site, if you will. Yeah, and I agree. Like I said, you can basically if you're doing this competitively, you can do it, but just take your time doing it and kind of think through the process, and you'll be fine, in my opinion. Do I program in C or C++? I have never done C. I have done C++. Yeah, but to be honest with you, if you can do C++, you could probably do C because C++ is basically the revised version of C. Dishwasher Man, you got that. Okay. Andre, no Python. Okay. Justin, just got my first software engineering internship with little to no experience at Bloomberg. Any tips? Practice, and since it is an internship, be sure to get all the experience that you can out of that internship. Ask questions if you need to, because the biggest thing is when you do an internship, that is where your future job security will come out of. And in some cases, if you do well, they'll be willing to give you an offer upon graduation. So that's what I say. Be good at, like master whatever it is that you're doing at this internship because it can secure your future. Yadi, have you ever worked in a networking field as a programmer? I have not. The closest I've done to networking, granted, I do have networking knowledge, but not as a network engineer per se. I never held that type of role, but I manage my home network, and it does have some fancy. It actually has. I guess I don't have the box. I thought I had the box for it, but I do have the WRT fancy Linksys router. It's not a Nighthawk, but it is a Linksys router that has 4 antennas on it, and it runs open WRT, and it's been configured to be set up in VLANs and all kinds of other stuff. So I have some knowledge, but typically my programming experience doesn't necessarily interact with the networking aspect of things, other than sending data across back and forth between websites and so forth. Mathematics, data structures and algorithms for software engineering is well studied. Yes. LR guys, you guys hiring. I'm about to graduate in a month and help a brother out. So if y'all have jobs, LR, just reach out. Hams, what are qualities a CS student have to land an internship in this current market? I think the qualities are the same as if this market was different, which is you got to know your stuff, you got to be willing to learn, and you got to be willing to adapt. That is, to be honest with you, in the IT field, that is a lot of what it's made of. It's being able to learn new things because the field of IT advances. 2-3 years ago, people were not talking about AI to the extent that they're talking about it today. Back then there was no thing or the concept of prompt engineering did not exist. Now it does. And if you don't know what that is, you're liable to get left behind. So you got to be able to evolve. You got to be able to keep up. And if you don't keep up, you'll get left behind. And you'll get left behind fairly quickly, to be honest with you, depending on where you work and what you do or do not know. Moisture Mike, PHP developer, did work as an entry-level web developer using PHP, WordPress, and JSON. Yeah, and that's why I say PHP, a lot of people question, like, PHP is not relevant. Yeah, it is, because people still use WordPress. WordPress is the most PHP-ist thing there is that's still being used today. C Maddox. C is that fun language you learn, then, excuse me, C is that fun language, learn it, and then you can reverse engineer at assembly level better. Ooh, no, we're not doing assembly around these parts. Sorry, but nah. All right, Moisture Mike, I got a chance to work as a dedicated PHP developer in my work, but if I get it, do you think I'll be stuck doing PHP? Probably. However, PHP is transferable to Java and C#. That being said, I don't think you would ever get stuck, like permanent. You may get stuck at that particular place of employment, but if you were to change or try to change into a different technology stack, you could easily, assuming that you're doing object-oriented PHP and not procedural PHP, you could easily switch over to doing C# or even Java, because those languages have the same, have similar syntax as PHP, so it wouldn't be too foreign of a concept. Now, there are some things in PHP that you can't do that you can do in the other languages and so forth, so just keep that in mind. Anthony, how do you feel about JavaScript frameworks? The only framework, I guess you could call it a framework, is TypeScript that I've ever used. I'm not familiar with any of the others like Angular, Rust, or not Rust. What's the other one? Node.js or any of those other things. I don't use any of those. We use TypeScript at work, but to be honest with you, in some cases, like, I don't use TypeScript in my personal project, but I can do JavaScript, like plain JavaScript. And some people freak it, like, why are you writing to that? Why not use a framework? I never bothered to learn the framework. That's why. Thank you for sharing the video and liking the live. Those of you that have done so. Opinions on cybersecurity job market is probably going to actually blow up to, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Cybersecurity is going to be a bigger thing, right? Especially because when you have things like these foreign entities and trying to ban TikTok and stuff like that nature, they claim it's for preventing threats from outside countries, but the biggest issue is not that. The biggest issue is just being able to the data. If you get the data, you can do wonders with it. AT&T mentioned earlier this week that they found that some of their users' data was on the dark web. Protecting that data is a big thing, and if somebody were hypothetically, actually, no, not hypothetically. Based on facts, I believe it was Experian, the credit reporting company. They had their data breached years ago. They ended up having to pay out a settlement for that because people had their social security numbers used against, used to open credit cards and all this other type of stuff that the actual owners of those social security numbers didn't authorize, and it was because of data breach. So cybersecurity, the biggest thing with cybersecurity is to protect the data. And because we have systems that are on the internet that are passing this data back and forth, that data can be accessed. You don't even have to step foot in the building to where that data is. If you know how to find your way through various firewalls and proxies and so forth, you can get that data. LR, is MERN stack a good way to start full stack? Yeah, I haven't heard anything bad about it, but I have never used MERN, so I can't really speak to it as much. Linux user, do you use Linux as a daily driver? I do at home. At work, I don't, because work provides me with a laptop, and that laptop has Windows. But the computers I have at home, actually, there's only 2 Windows laptops in this house, and that's my personal laptop, which I don't use except when I have to use something that requires Windows, and my wife's laptop, which has Windows on it, because she's familiar with Windows, not so much Linux. Sliders, I think that's how you say it. Old head programmer refusing to add dependencies. I don't agree with you, but I understand you. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't want to try to force new things, right? Like if it works, stick with what works. Should I start using Linux? Says AR. Yes. Majority of the world's websites, and I emphasize world's websites, not the websites in the US, not the websites in Canada, the world's websites runs on some variation of Linux. That being said, if you have skills related to Linux, you will be very, you will not go without a job, if that makes sense. Um, Linux offers a different set of opportunities. A lot of the open source stuff that is available, granted, that is evolving, but a lot of the open source software that is available is designed to run on Linux. And to be honest with you, Linux that it has a bunch of variations that are available, and so because of that, you can build Linux from source. Um, but most people don't do that. But if you wanted to build your own distribution with your own set of features, you could do that. You can't do that with Windows because Windows is closed source. So yes, learn Linux. Picnic is the biggest security vulnerability. Uh, I'm not going to say no, it isn't, but like I said, the biggest issue that I see is accessing the data, whether you have legit access to the data or no legit access to the data. Um, Linux user, do you have any thoughts on the recent XZ backdoor? I think you were talking about the one where the guy gained trust and eventually was about to put a backdoor in until somebody at Microsoft recognized it and was like, hey, you can't do that. If that is what you're talking about, then thankfully that it was caught. Sliders, yes, thank you for tuning in. As for the backdoor, yes, it is a good thing that it was caught because, like I said, majority of the world's servers run, or world's computers, servers, websites run on Linux. And so to have a backdoor into all of those systems, that would have been major bad. And once that backdoor had been exploited, yeah, it would have sent the world into a tizzy, and it may have actually even shut down some, transportation operations or even like infrastructure operations like electrical systems and so forth. So that would have been very bad on a very large scale. Pyro Monkey. So what's more important, build secure software or secure design? Both, actually. Because the thing is, even though data is the gold, right? And when it comes to IT, so if you have the data, you have the gold. What can you do with the gold? You can do a lot of things. You can make people give you more gold in the form of currency, with ransomware attacks and so forth. And so building secure software at the same time building secure networks are both important. If you haven't heard about SQL injection, there are some systems that are designed to not do to prevent SQL injection. And, all you got to do is manipulate the form field and have it spit out a whole table of data. I remember when I had a Drupal website that I maintained as my blog. Every now and then I would go in the log files and see what they were doing. And these knuckleheads, whoever they were, with the systems that they built, would go and use the login form and try to do SQL injection into the login form to see if it would actually, dump out all of the users in the database. And that was showing up in the server logs. So, imagine you have a vulnerability because your system that you're using doesn't protect against SQL injection in the most unlikely manner, or in the most common of manners, even. Because like I've even had stuff where, what was it? I have a static site currently for my blog, but every now and then I can go in the logs and look in the logs and see 404 WP login, 404 users/login. All these common URLs for these content management systems are attempting to be accessed by these bots and these scammers out here. And thankfully it's a static website, so I don't have that problem. But in the worst case scenario, there's a database sitting there behind that, and somebody just bombards it with requests, and causes the database to go down because it's getting too many requests, causes the web server to go down because it's getting too many requests. So that said, secure software and secure design are both important. There isn't one more important than the other. In Kapala, in college for computer science, regarding current job market, should I continue? Love coding, by the way. Yes. College coding is not going to go anywhere. It may evolve over time, and I say that because of the fact of AI. People say, well, AI is going to take over coding jobs. No, it won't, because somebody has to code the AI. But what I tell people is, as if you're going to go into programming, you need to, one, know whatever programming languages that you're good at, but then two, you need to be able to know how to do what they call prompt engineering. Basically, how do you get the AI tool, ChatGPT, what's the other one? Bing has Copilot built into it. So ChatGPT, Copilot, Bard, all of these AI systems, how do you prompt that system to give you what you need out of it? That should be, if you don't have that as your programmers or in your programmer's skill set and or programmer's toolbox, prompting AI is something you need to know how to do. Now, and I will say this, I habitually use ChatGPT, not because I don't know how to program, but because I want to practice that prompt engineering skill that I foresee will be a value add in the future. Because here's the thing, I could write 1,000 lines of code, right? And it may take me 12 hours to do it. Or I can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need some code that does this. And ChatGPT takes 15 seconds to write that same 1,000 lines. And then you just got to go and test it to make sure. Or you could even tell ChatGPT, all right, you wrote this 1,000 lines of code, write the automated test that will verify that 1,000 lines of code that you just wrote actually works. And it's written the code for it to test the thing. And you've probably spent 10 minutes talking to ChatGPT to give it what it does. But on the other hand, you could have spent 12 hours writing that stuff from scratch. So prompt engineering is a big thing. Mac Maddox, are you on LinkedIn? Yes. Go to LinkedIn. The URL, Kenny Robinson is my name on there. But there's a linkedin.com/n/K Robinson Tech, and you will see me. Linux user, what Linux distro do you use on your systems as your daily driver? The system I have here are Ubuntu. I do have a Raspberry Pi that runs my Christmas light stuff that is Debian based. I don't know if it's actual Debian or not, because it's a package. Like, the software that I use is packaged into the operating system with it, but it's Debian based. So Ubuntu is what I have. Unreal or Unity for mobile development. I don't know Toon TV because I don't do mobile development. Unfortunately, I do web development. Dr. Faustus, but you need to be able to read code to verify it's right. That is true. And that's the thing with AI. Yeah, you can tell it but you have to verify what it gives you back. And so that's why I say prompt engineering will make you a better programmer because it can do things faster. But at the same time, yes, you still do have to verify what it gives you is correct. Ivan, do you think majoring in computer science is worth the risk of AI taking over in the next 10 to 20 years? There is no risk for AI taking over. So that's what I just mentioned, that AI will, if you are smart as a programmer and want to prepare yourself for what's to come, you will start using AI now to assist you to do even the most mundane of things. Now, I'm not saying you need to use AI to write the simplest or all your code, but you do need to use AI to be familiar with how it works and how to phrase things and how to present the problem or the code that you want it to write so that it gives it back to you, ideally in the first 3 tries. Because one thing that I've learned with using ChatGPT is, okay, I'll say, I need this. And ChatGPT will give me that. And I'm like, that ain't what I want. And then so I have to sit here and correct ChatGPT. And then eventually I learned, okay, if I give ChatGPT not only what I want, but the parameters surrounding what I want and how not to do it, or what specific things in the language that I wanted to use, then it only takes me one or two tries to get the exact code snippet that I need. So definitely AI is not going to take over. It will play a factor in it, but to make yourself career resilient, you need to start using AI now to assist you in these tasks. And then once you get to that point where AI is doing a whole lot more, you won't be behind the curve trying to catch up, because you have gotten ahead of the curve now. And when that curve comes, when you get to the curve in the road, you'll be ready for it. Do I ever get tired of coding, or has it remained fun? It has remained fun, because here's the thing. I'm not coding stuff that I only do at work. Like, I have this. This is the ESP32. And I mentioned this earlier. This traffic light here, it has an ESP32 in it as well. I coded a controller for that. Outside, I have a Raspberry Pi as well as another one of these that control lights for holiday lighting. So I have Christmas lights that are not up right now, but then in the non-Christmas season, I actually have these lights that reflect off they're floodlights. They're the big floodlights that you would normally put up on your house or wherever else. But I have the color floodlights. And so what I do is, like right now, if you were standing outside my house, you would see the blue lights that are pointing at my house, because I pick different colors for the various holidays or the various emphasis of the months and stuff like that. So like for Easter, I had the cyan, yellow, and purple colors flashing on the house, because typically Easter eggs are those bright, springy looking colors. For Valentine's Day, I lit up the house for red. So the thing is, when it comes to coding, you have to, if you're going to do it, yeah, you got your stuff at work that you do. But for me, is okay, I do this at work, but then I also do it at home. But when I do it at home, I do it for stuff that I want to do, not because of stuff at work. And while I haven't got much feedback, well, my wife has complained like, hey, you need to consult me on these colors so I can, basically because she wants her input on it. But the Christmas light stuff, that is a big deal, especially when it comes to the kids and, people just being amazed by the lights. But that, for me, is a fun coding project that I do throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, I put those lights on display. Tekken. OFC, you need to have knowledge and background, and you need to know what you're looking for. That is true, yes, when it comes to AI. Kaz, do you think that honing in on cybersecurity or full stack development is better for a job? They are both equally as important, because cybersecurity, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have people that have to protect the data in the systems. Full stack development, programming and new applications and new software and all this other stuff is going to either have to be maintained and or replaced in the future. So both of those are good opportunities. In my opinion, cybersecurity may pay more than full stack development, because of the fact there's a greater risk in cybersecurity, as in the data being stolen or leaked, in comparison to full stack development. Now, I'm not saying full stack development is not as important as cybersecurity, but being able to protect that data is typically given more weight than to be able to give that data to authorized users. Yuh says, my professor for data structures is inactive and just makes us read textbooks. Any advice to pass? Maybe you need to form a study group with the other classmates. I would also consider going online and finding tutorials that are available to explain those concepts. Find other user groups that exist for data structures. I'm sure you can find them on the various social media sites and so forth. Captain Coben, all is good. You a Linux user, what's text editor or IDE do you use to code? I use VS Code at home. I, at work, use a combination of VS Code and Visual Studio, because at work we use Windows. But VS Code is what I primarily use at home. And on the occasion, I will open Nano or VI. Mathematics. Remember that LLMs like ChatGPT are probabilistic models and are prone to hallucinations. Yes, that's true, and that's something you have to consider when you're putting this data in there or you're asking it questions to make sure that what you're asking it, like you need to verify what is given back to you instead of just blindly trusting it. And I review what it gives me back, but I've also learned that if I give it enough information to be able to process, in some cases, they even give it more of what I do or don't want, that then is able to give me a more accurate code output. So a lot of what you get back is dependent upon what you put in. And if you don't put in enough or you put in irrelevant stuff, then you run into the problem of, well, how's that saying go? Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. So I fully agree with that. All right. I will be calling things quit at the half past the hour. So if you have any last minute questions, feel free to drop those in. I thank all of you that have joined thus far and participated. Opinions on Java. Java is a good programming language. I have done Java in the past. I did Java as testing automation. And so it works, no problems with it. If you want to do Java, by all means, go ahead. Use chain of thought to make the model explain itself. Okay, I've never heard of that, but that's a useful piece of information. Oftentimes, I don't really care if it explains itself. But typically for example, when I'm putting code in and it types, it gives back something. If I don't like what it gives back, I just say, hey, I don't like that. I need you to change it to do something else. And most of the time it will figure out a different way of doing it. In some cases, it will actually return back the same response that it previously gave, to which then I'd be like, okay, it's not going to figure this out. To which then I have to go and find out something different. But there's that. Okay. Cool. All right, so still got 3 more minutes before I have to call it quits for the evening. JavaScript framework of choice. I don't have one, unfortunately. I don't work with JavaScript frameworks. I do use TypeScript, so I guess if you want to say that's the framework of choice, it will be TypeScript. Computer science teacher, 9th grade. We teach Java and processing in our state curriculum. Got it. That's great. That's something I wish more schools would start doing now. I know where I live at, they have a STEM curriculum or STEM certification for each of the schools. And as a NSBE member, I've been trying to see how we can play a factor in getting those schools certified, but nothing has come up as of yet. Mathematics, deep learning deeplearning.ai has great free courses on AI, and a lot of them are free. Thank you for that information. Be like me, faux programmer PHP programmer. Okay. Justin, do people still use COBOL or Fortran? The financial industry does still use COBOL. There are some legacy systems that you may be able to find using Fortran, but what I've heard of is a lot of those people, they're paying for people to learn those languages, primarily because those systems, the financial industry is built on a lot of mainframe type systems. So if you have COBOL experience and you can figure that out, you'll have a job set for life, because I don't know of any current mainframe programmers that are under the age of 50. Unesthetic. Any advice for beginners, students trying for internships? To, one, practice and be good at what you need to know. Have your resume reviewed by your career center at your college or university, and be a good learner, right? Because the thing with IT and tech is that you have to be willing to learn constantly, like not just today, not just tomorrow, but constantly, because tech is forever evolving. User with a bunch of numbers. I wish I had computer sciences in high school. Yeah, some classes are often in high school, like where I went to. Granted, my school was a magnet school, high school that is. We did have like a web development class, and I think we had Office, we had keyboarding, Microsoft Office that is. So we had several computer related classes. Love. Did you go to Atlanta for the 50th? Yes, I was there. Lee Moses, do you think it's possible to get a data scientist job with a bachelor's in computer science? Yes, very possible. That's like I said, just practice. Kevin Devine, Arkansas, the computer science curriculum is created by the State Math Science Arts High School in Hot Springs. Okay. See, in the state of Alabama, I think the Department of Education actually came up with the curriculum for each of the schools. And then it was on schools to figure out how to implement it within their system. So that's the biggest caveat here. Is the work hard for programming or IT? It can be, just depends. Johnson, beginner IT and front end here. Could you give the rundown on Linux? Isn't it just the OS? Yes, but the OS, yes, it is just an operating system, but it's the ability of what you can do with that operating system, right? Linux-based systems have lower overhead, which means they perform better than the equivalent Windows-based system. And there are a lot of other advantages to using a Linux-based system. Now, a lot of people are scared of Linux because they see the command line and they freak out. Like, I got to know all the commands to type. Here's the thing. The internet is for free. You can figure out all the commands by doing some Google searching. How do I move this file? And it'll tell you MV, the file you want to move and where you want to move it to. Not that difficult. But if you do Linux, not only can you, if you are familiar with Linux, not only you will have a job, because there are a lot of positions that are available for just maintaining Linux-based systems. Love of due to engineering. Matt, I missed you. Yeah, it would have been good to catch up. Yeah, shoot me a message. We can talk about NSP stuff if you want to. Linux user, do you think that building distros like Arch Linux and Gentoo by hand are worth it? Not unless you have a use case. Doing it for the sake of doing it, I wouldn't. But if you have a use case for that, or you have features that you want to build into that, then yeah, like there is a distro of Linux. There's a Ubuntu-based distro of Linux that is designed for older PCs, and I think it's called Lubuntu. And I used it once before on my older computer where it couldn't keep up with the latest version of Ubuntu, but it was able to run that lighter weight version of Ubuntu without any problem. All right, so last couple of questions here, and this will be it. All right, so I know about Alabama. My daughter goes to the big Tuscaloosa, so I look to see their curriculum. Yeah, and yeah, depending on where you go, yeah, it can vary. Mathematics. Also check out huggingface.co. This is where AI practitioners hang out. All right, thank you for that information. All right, so with that will be the last question and or comment for this evening. I thank you all for watching, tuning in, and liking, and all that other jazz, following too. That said, if you have additional questions, send me a message. I will be glad to answer those there. And you never know, I may even put your question as a future video so that everybody knows who you are and you're asking questions in tech. All right, thank you for watching. And if you want to catch the replay will be available on my other platforms. My other platforms can be accessed by clicking the link in my profile. Thank you all, and maybe I'll schedule the next live. Thank y'all for watching.